Welcome to episode 9. We are back for another week. It is an
9
odd
in.
time. It's my morning. It's Tom's nighttime. Tom's about to go on a little bit of a jaunt. Where are you going again, mate?
I'm going over to Copenhagen for the Queen's Jubilee long weekend here. So there's so many British flags and so much pageantry flying around the country at the moment.
Tom is a strong royalist, so it's all about celebrating the Queen and everything she's done for the world. But
Exactly.
by the time this is out and on YouTube, Tom will be back in his house, so do not take this as a signal to rob him while he is away, which apparently is a thing. Anyway,
really? On YouTube channels and stuff.
Yeah, like people like swap people and all sorts of stuff. Like people will monitor social media for people saying they're on holidays and then use that as a sign to go and rob their house.
I never thought of that. That's genius. Well done on the new age social media robbers.
Yeah, it's wild. What are you drinking given it's nighttime?
This time I'm switched around. I am drinking some pure sugarcane juice from the island of Mauritius, also known as rum. Okay. Just says pure sugarcane juice on it, but it says rum, and it says rum, and then it's the word labor, and then donné in French. So it's like labor donné. It's a big confusing word.
I feel like the meaning of the word donné could really change the whole meaning of this sentence. Who knows what it means?
Here it is, and then I got some yogurt, which you'll probably see me munching on in a bit.
Yeah, very nice. Well, I have nothing. I went to make a coffee and realized I had like 4 coffee beans. So I'm just absorbing the energy of the sun, photosynthesizing some goodness. But I'll get a coffee after we're done.
I assume not from your 4 beans.
No, not from my 4 beans. I will go out and get one. Let's dive straight into it. What do we got this week? I am talking about an interesting discovery, little experiment run by a researcher called Giannis Darris. He was at Google. No, he still is. He's still at Google. And he was playing around with the DALLE-2 model. And he found some pretty interesting discoveries, which he originally called the secret language of DALLE-2. He more conservatively changed that back to hidden vocabulary in DALLE-2, but secret language sounds cool, and it will definitely be on the thumbnail. So I'll talk about what he found there, because it's pretty wild.
Yeah, good. Remind everyone what DALLE-2 is.
Yeah, it's an image model that came out from OpenAI a couple of months ago now. And people have been playing around with it, getting it to do all sorts of crazy things.
We talked about it on air, right?
I think we did.
Yeah, good. Good.
I think, Tom, we have lost your camera there for a little bit.
I just heard my USB thing go, which is not a good sign.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Alrighty. Yeah, this week. So I'm talking about a topic of how we've forgotten how to build nuclear power plants.
That seems like something you wouldn't want to forget how to do. It sounds interesting.
Yeah. We lost the plans. We don't know where they are.
Oh, damn it. Sweet. Well, without further ado, let's get stuck into it. I think
take us away, mate.
I think I'm first. So you got this. I even did slides. I'm following in Tom's footsteps, and I got some images.
I'm so proud of you.
Yeah. I mean, they're basic as hell, but that's all good. Anyway, this is our boy, Giannis Darris.
Good name.
Student researcher at Google. Yeah, I probably mispronounced the fuck out of that, but is a PhD student at UT Austin, and he's done some cool stuff. So hit him up on Twitter, I suppose. That seems to be his preferred form of social network.
Follow his GitHub. Do you follow a GitHub?
I
think how you do it?
I think you can, but I don't know what happens if you do. Anyway.
Yeah. Let's see what the bump is to his Twitter account after the old WhatsApp plug. It's at 1771 at the moment.
Yeah, it definitely will be all from us. But anyway.
I'm going to give Nathan Benaika a follow as well. Are you sharing your screen yet, or does no one know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I am sharing my screen.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Anyway, let's set the scene. So DALLE-2 comes out a couple of months ago, and it's a model from OpenAI that allows you to give a text prompt. So you might type two guys hosting a fully sick podcast in the style of Claude Monet, and it would produce an image from that text prompt. And the short and sharp on how that works is that it takes that text, it has a text encoding step, so it turns that into a internal representation, and then it has a second step where it takes that internal representation and turns that back into an image. And
Very cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
It is awesome. And if you've been, hanging out on any forms of social media where nerds hang out, you'll probably see people putting together some weird DALL-2 outputs from all sorts of prompts that they're coming up with.
DALLE-2 art. Side note: what is OpenAI?
So OpenAI is it was originally a not-for-profit research group. I think they've sort of dropped the not-for-profit necessity. It was primarily funded by Elon Musk, and it's all about just sort of pushing the boundaries on AI research in general, based mostly in the US from memory, but I think they have people in lots of different places. So, what did our friend do? So he sort of came across this discovery by asking DALLE-2 to generate a picture of two farmers talking about vegetables. And this is what it put out. And as you can see, there's two farmers and they're holding vegetables and they appear to be talking, but it's just gibberish.
Is there something apocryphal about two farmers talking about vegetables? Is that some fable that is passed down through the AI communities?
No, it was a test to see if the image model could really understand sort of wider context. And this is what it spat out. So it got pretty close. But the curiosity I think that struck here was, what the hell is Apolivicimentaris and Vicutus? Because
And then also like a little bit of like Greek Syriac alphabet in there as well.
Yeah. And so the team here said, okay, what if we took this term Vicutis and just told DALL-2 to make pictures of Vicutus, whatever the fuck that is. And so they did it.
This is the best.
And it's food, mainly vegetables.
Oh my god! What do farmers grow?
Vegetables. And so, in a way, asking two farmers to talk about vegetables and having two farmers talk about Vicutis was, as far as this model was concerned, correct. And this sort of led the group down a sort of weird spiral of, all right, what other secret weird words are hidden within the DALL-2 vocabulary that mean things that we would understand, but do not translate. So another example that they tried was this one with whales. This was draw a picture of two whales talking about food. And
I love these examples. Two farmers, whales. Like, it's not like let's create sentient beings. It's let's do some whales.
Yeah.
Sentient whales.
And then so the little text prompt that's in that speech bubble there was then used to generate the images on the right, which are not only food, but food that an AI might think a whale would eat.
AI's so smart.
Which is crazy. And I'll point out that there are some caveats. There are just as many prompts here that it doesn't work for. But I think the fact that it ever works at all like this is kind of cool. And it just goes to show that, these models open up new possibilities that, nobody designed this ability to generate gobbledygook and have it somehow be related. But it just gives us new tools to play with and start to create some really wild and wonderful things.
And this is innovation, right? Like, we have no idea when we create random things like this, like sometimes we create two whales speaking in a made up language, but sometimes we create penicillin. Like, this is innovation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you can take that as a blessing or as a curse. It has raised a few eyebrows saying, if AI models for DALLE-2 are doing this, can we really say that we know what any of these advanced AI models are doing? And if they're in a mission critical context, like in health, should we be worried that there exists some watches, a keys that automatically maps to, give this person all the pharmaceuticals?
Is there something magic about the two of the same genus talking about food? Like, if you asked whether a stick and a ant were talking about the weather, would it produce something?
I think it's an easier thing for it to do. Where DALLE-2 seems to have some limitations is if you say things like, a stuffed bear sitting next to an apple, the bear is brown, the apple is red. It sometimes struggles to keep a lot of the context. So it might make the apple brown and the bear red. So I think the effort here was, all right, let's try and just minimize the number of variables that could be going on here, and use some simple text prompts. But should we get access to DALLE-2, which I did apply for a while back, we can try a stick talking to an ant about the weather and see what we get out.
Okay. Episode 25.
Yeah. Well, the waitlist is like 10,000 people long, and they are chunking through it, maybe 25 a week. So it may be episode 2500 at this stage.
Why is it so slow for a waitlist for software?
A little bit of hype gen. Don't know really. I don't know. OpenAI has been a little funny historically about sharing this stuff.
Not very open about their AI.
Yeah, ironically not open. Yeah.
So I have a question, and you can either tell me to shut up and we can talk about it at the end, or we can talk about it now. I remember reading, and we were sitting, and I remember reading about it in like your PhD room. So this is like, we're getting on like 7 years here at this point. And it was a story about how Facebook trained two AIs to work together to solve a problem, and they ended up to communicate creating their own random secret language. How much overlap does this have with that? And I remember it kind of being a bit of a clickbaity title back in the day.
Yes. And I mean, the big overlap is that both of these things are a little bit clickbaity, but they're both kind of true. The Facebook example, it wasn't a secret underground language that the AIs were using to conspire. It just found, for example, yet. You can liken it to if they were talking in English and they found that you can actually just drop all of the X's out of words and all of the, double letters and still get your message across. It just found ways to compress that information better in a more suitable way. So it'd almost be like, you remember from the early 90s, those posters about like, understand the secret language of your children on text. And it was like, text acronyms and then what they meant. And they were just like ridiculously wrong.
It's almost like you make a podcast with your friend and you go back and listen to it and realize that you have lots of fillers and you have lots of pauses and lots of reductive statements in your language.
Yes. Yeah, exactly like that.
This is a new level of meta that we've just reached. Quickly, change slides.
But again, well, I mean, that was my last slide. So.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah, I mean, I just find this sort of stuff fascinating. I think there is so much to be explored with these models. There was a similar one, which I wrote about in my newsletter, which was about teaching GPT-3 to reverse words. So GPT-3 is just a text-to-text system, and somebody worked out how to give it the right set of prompts that it could learn how to take any word and reverse it. and it turned out to be not a straightforward process. And so, yeah, I think this is very similar and opens a lot of doors.
So this makes me very excited, and I might be repeating myself. I've forgotten what's in this episode and what isn't because we've been having all manner of technical trouble. So if I'm repeating myself, sorry, but if I'm not repeating myself and I sound smarter saying it second time around, then excellent. This excites me because this is, to me, how innovation happens, where we throw some stuff together and some random stuff comes out the other side. Sometimes it's penicillin and it's causes or saves millions and millions of lives, and sometimes it's whales speaking to each other in a made-up language. Do you see any direct application? What excites you about this is probably a better question rather than direct application.
Yeah, applications seem very few and far between other than memes. But what excites me is it sort of opens a door to some of the internals of AI models, allows us to take a peek under the hood. And I think often, the same way that, as you say, penicillin was developed through a series of very controlled accidents, once it was found, we started to dig into it and really get a better understanding of, microbiology and human health. I think in the same way, seeing the way these models works may allow us to develop a whole new sort of observational science, and from that, a whole new fundamental science of how AI fits together.
Very cool. Very cool. Oh no, I forgot my question. I was so ready for it. Quickly, do some filler music or something. Not helping.
Music. This show has been a bit of a circus, so it's appropriate.
We had to delay another hour, so I'm a glass and a half deeper in wine than I expected to be. So,
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, unless you remember your question, shall we jump on to topic number 2 today?
Let's do it. Let's jump on to topic number 2.
All right. Oh, we've got your slides on the screen. We are ready to go.
Oh, so slides are on the screen. We're going. We're up and we're running. So my topic this week is we've forgotten how to build nuclear plants as a Western world. I say Western because, by Western I mean everyone but China. And a little bit of my background is that I actually worked in a nuclear plant for like 6 months in the US when I was a management consultant back in the day. So I know a little bit about them, not a huge amount, but I know enough, more than probably your average person. And the reason why this fascinates me, and this isn't an article that I dug up, it was just a thing that I came across on the World Nuclear Foundation. And this fascinates me because everyone talks about how important nuclear power is to the future energy mix, the future zero carbon energy mix. And I just want you to take, this is not a pro-nuclear, anti-nuclear discussion. This is how I see it, in that regardless of where you sit on the spectrum of whether we should build lots of nuclear or we shouldn't build any nuclear, I don't think it really matters, because I think we've forgotten how to build nuclear plants, and there might not be that many in the future if we don't remember how to make them quite quickly. So on the screen here, I got a little graph, and this is the nuclear generation capacity since 1970. From looking at the graph, I think the operating capacity peaked in like 2007, let's call it. And however, we built and were operating about 90% of current day's capacity in 1990. So we're currently sitting here in 2022, which means that at least 90% of the world's operating capacity of nuclear plants is like 32 years old minimum. In reality, most of them are kind of verging on 40 years old. So plants are getting really old, and this graph that I'm showing here is just completely plateaued over the last, call it 10 years. There's hardly been any additions. There's actually been drops. So I'm going to jump into a few of the biggest countries in the world to demonstrate a point here of how we've forgotten to build nuclear plants. So let's, and forgot my graphs, but here's an age graph that we've got. So basically the less than 10 years has dropped to probably below, call it 15% of total fleet capacity. So things are getting very, very old. And the 30 to 39 year cohort is getting even bigger part of the proportion. What do you reckon that is? Do you reckon that's like 40% of the capacity there, Elliot?
I don't know. I hate these graphs. It's such an awkward way to display this information.
Yeah, it should just be pie charts.
Yeah, just a time varying pie chart. That's what we need.
Yeah. So let's show it to a few countries. So we've got France's nuclear power here. So the reason why I picked France is it's, I think, the second largest nuclear producer in the world, generation producer. It's also the largest electricity exporter in the world. Didn't know that, but turns out when you're in Europe and you can just throw a cable over the fence, it's pretty easy to be an exporter. So the largest electricity exporter, and they're 70% nuclear. And the reason why they're such a big exporter is because they're one of the biggest firm load capacities in Europe. They're one of the few countries that has a bunch of base load power. Their capacity peaked in 1998, and many plants are more than 30 years old at this stage. In 2005, EDF, which is kind of like the state-owned but private electricity thingy in the country, planned to replace, in 2005, they planned to replace one unit per year for the next 40 years so they could keep their current supply. That was their plan in 2005. The first one they were going to build was called Flamanville, or if you wrote that phonetically, it's Flamanville number 3. And so Flamanville number 3 is the third reactor on the Flamanville site. There's already 1 and 2. Originally, it went from being 3.3 billion euros in 2005, planning to be operational by the end of 2010, to not being able to be started up into 2023 for a nice cost of about 12.7 billion euros. So it's 13 years late and 4 times the cost. Remember how they said they're going to build one of these per year for the next 40 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, they only plan to build one more called Plenary 3, and they cancelled it in 2021 without even digging ground. So they haven't built any since they said that in 2005.
Wow.
Instead, they've decided to extend all the plants. They're trying to expand all of the lives to 60 years. Most of them have been approved to 40 years. So they just went, stuff it, we're just going to extend it. Kick the can down the road.
I mean, I don't know what's involved in extending the life of a nuclear plant, but if you can do it, that doesn't seem like that crazy an idea.
No, yeah. I'm on board for extending if we can. Like, it's great, but we just can't build them. France can't build them.
It seems to.
But the funny, you go.
Yeah, is there any indication of why it took so long or cost so much? Was it economic climate, engineering problems, or what?
Yeah. I'll run through a few more, and then we'll jump into kind of the reasons. So, the funny thing I find about this is EDF is technically a nuclear contract exporter. They go across the world and build different nuclear plants for people, yet they couldn't build one in France. They're currently building one in the UK, and it's currently 2 years late and 50% over budget.
I mean, that's an improvement.
Yeah, it is. But what I've learned from these things is 2 years away, it's more time for it to get delayed further.
Yeah, fair enough.
So let's go to the next country, which is our friends, the dear old USA. I decided to represent with foods rather than flags. So they are the largest nuclear power producer in the world. They produce the most electrons via nuclear. They've now got 3 plants that have been approved to operate for 80 years lifetime. They have 3 more under review to operate for 80 years, and there's another 7 to expected to apply for that long. One of the plants that I worked at, I think, will probably be the plant that I worked at will probably fall into that. Since about 2002, there has been one new build, and it's called the Vogtle 3 and 4. Once again, building building new reactors on the same site. So it's not like they have to go like kick a bunch of people out and move them 5 kilometers away and everything like that. This is on the same site. The original cost was $14 billion. Expected 2019 online date. It's now $30 billion and 2023 start date.
Another expensive one. 2023 sounds like it's going to be peak nuclear, though.
Yeah, exactly. The Sumner 2 and 3, they spent $4.7 billion and canned the project at the 60% mark because 3 companies were bankrupted. No one would finance it.
That's insane. Are these government funded or private funded?
It's a little bit of both. Like they're so big, right? Like they're so big that they need government, and it's a combination of federal and local and state funding. So the US is once again extending their plant lives to 80 years. They're going for the 80-year stretch on these things, which, hey, if we do it, I'm on board for. Seems a little risky, but yeah. Like these plants are like, you go in there and you realize how old they are. Like I went into the control room of one of these things and you feel like you're walking into... Have you seen Chernobyl, the TV series?
No.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Well,
but,
anyway, it looks like that reactor room in it. It looks like a 1960s nuclear power plant reactor.
Oh, yeah. A vivid image for everyone, I'm sure.
The pressure gauges, instead of being an actual digital gauge that says the pressure, it would literally write it out on a bit of paper, like it was an automatic like drawery thing. It would draw it on a bit of paper, and that was the log. And people used to take those and then microfilm them, and then photocopy them and upload them.
Good time.
It was, yeah. It was crazy, and to like replace them was like too hard, so they just kept on doing that. So there's a couple of reasons why we think that it's too hard to build nuclear in these countries. One is the insane regulation around nuclear. Like there is so much regulation around it, rightfully so, especially post Fukushima. I remember the plant that I was at, they had to increase their capital expenditure budget by like 3x over the 5 years after Fukushima to make a bunch of upgrades that the nuclear organization certification body of the world said you need to do this post Fukushima, even though they were hundreds of miles inland and nowhere near any earthquake fault lines or tsunamis. So one is the regulation that like if you wanted to do anything and just put the word nuclear around it, it now takes 5 times as long and costs 5 times as much because of the regulation involved.
Yeah.
The other thing is that it's kind of ties into the regulation, but the skills required to build a nuclear plant are so to be trained. There's only so many people in certain areas that have done that because there's so few that have been built that to be a nuclear qualified welder, for example, means you're a hot commodity and your salary is very, very high. The other thing there is that generally there's only a couple of engineering contractors in the world who can actually build these things. Like Bechtel is one of them, I think, in the US, and then EDF in France is another one, and then Rosatom, which is Russia, is like the third one. So there's just like only a few people can do it. And the fourth reason is that it kind of ties. The third reason, sorry, it kind of ties into the second reason, which is that because we've just haven't built that many in the last 10 years, like we've actually just like, we don't have these people to do it. You know, like all the people that built the nuclear reactors in the 70s are either well retired or most likely not here anymore. It was 60 years ago. And these things take 10 years from idea to minimum. They used to take 10 years from idea to first atom. First electron being produced. So if you had a plant that was finished in 1990, the person that learnt how to build that was probably trained in the 70s. And if you look at those graphs, we peaked in 1993, like call it the early 90s. Everyone who was trained to make those was trained in the 80s. They probably retired in the 2000s, 2010s. They're not really here anymore. So we actually like legitimately have probably forgotten that skill. and it sits with a very few small amount of people in the world.
Also, given how infrequently they're built, there's a lot of civil engineering innovation that happens from building skyscraper after skyscraper after skyscraper. As Josh Waitzkin would put it, those tight loops. There are no tight loops here. Who's to say that a nuclear power plant built today wouldn't have a little drawing thing because nobody has done the required design work and regulatory work to get away from that?
Yeah. Now, there is one person in the world that knows how to build them, and that's our friend China.
Wow.
So I've switched the graph here, and I had a quick click around, and they are the only country in the world that has a accelerating growth for operable nuclear power capacity in the world. They're at 50,000 megawatt equivalents in 2022, which makes them the third biggest. They'll be bigger than France within a couple of years. They have another 20,000, so like another almost 50%, so like 40% being built at the moment. They just, like, you look at the list of planned, like, it's so big. They're just crushing them out. They are just absolutely crushing them out. And the amazing thing is that they're doing them in like less than 5 years. So on this graph here, there's like green lines of things getting built in China from like soil being broken to completed. On the graph as well, I put some big red bars to show those US plants that I talked about. They're like by far the longest lines in terms of time on the graph. And China is just building so many, and they're into the fourth wave, and the reactors just keep getting bigger and bigger, better and better, sorry. And if you look at the cost as well, like China's going to have energy coming out of these things for like 5.9, 6 cents per kilowatt hour equivalent, whereas that France one is going to be like 12 to 13 cents. Like, if you talk about competitiveness, like half the cost of electricity, wow, that's a huge boost to your competitiveness as a country from an economic point of view.
And where geographically are these being built? Could China take over France's position as major exporter into Europe?
Well, interestingly, they are now co-manufacturing, producery, contractory thing for this UK plant. And what I think is interesting with the Western world can't build nuclear plants in a competitive manner compared to China. I think that is something I'm fairly sure of. And yet with the current climate, I don't think there would be many countries that would sign themselves up to have their entire electricity network built and maintained by China. I know, for example, Australia wouldn't. I know at the moment that the US probably wouldn't as well. And so this has some like interesting ramifications in that everyone keeps talking about how nuclear power will be part of the mix. Nuclear power will be part of the mix. But the only people, and I will say that I'm not sure what Russia's situation is, and hey, Iran might surprise us with their ability to produce nuclear, but like if China is the only one in the world that can build nuclear plants, the only people that are going to have nuclear plants in 30 years' time, that aren't new nuclear plants, are China and the people that are within China's sphere of influence.
You could imagine an alternative where if we find a reasonable way to export power, hydrogen, for example, China could become a major hydrogen exporter. And I think the political appetite for importing hydrogen from China would be much higher than having China build a locally domiciled nuclear plant.
Yes and no, but how dependent would countries want to get on China? Like, look what's happening with Russia and Europe at the moment in the Russia's gas during their invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I think sovereign energy production is a pretty important matter of national security.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there a path back to us remembering how to build these? What do we need to do?
So the general consensus on how to be better at building nuclear plants is, as a set of countries, you need to get together and do what China's done here, which is since 1995, they've approved and financed and started constructing about 40 plants. Instead of trying to build one, you need to build 40. And the way China seeded it was they imported a lot of talent from Westinghouse and EDF, which were the kind of major contractors and constructors in the world. And now they have their own homegrown talent that can produce these plants. And now they're exporting that again. So if the US wanted to go and say, you know what, we're going to be a nuclear power, i.e. nuclear energy production power, they would just have to go out and say, we're going to build 20 now in the next 10 years. And in the following 10 years, we're going to build another 20. And the government's going to chip in half the cost, and the private sector's got to chip in the other half. And the reason why then is you start to get economies of scale. It's just like, think of it as a factory.
Yeah. Do you see that happening?
No, I do not. And the reason why I do not see it happening is, how many nuclear plants do you think are going to get approved in Europe? How many nuclear plants do you think are going to get approved in the US? Nobody wants them in their back garden. And this is another point for another day, but that's why I don't believe in these small modular reactors. Who the hell wants one of those within 5 kilometers of them?
Yeah.
So I don't think, and it's the same reason why China has been able to build high-speed railway at like 8 times the rate of Europe. It's because they just go, yep, cool, we're putting a railway line here. And there is issues with that. But that is the reason why China can do that, is that they just say this is happening, and they do it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think there would need to be a big social political shift in order for people to get behind nuclear power. I don't think it'd be popular at election time if you said, I'm going to build 40 nuclear power plants across, southeast Queensland.
There'd only be like a very small set of like energy nerds that would like vote for you.
Definitely.
And it's to the point now as well that we're so bad at producing these things that all of the cost equations will start soon swinging away from nuclear favor, and they'll be even more dead in the water, in my opinion. If you have the choice between building a solar plant or nuclear, people are just going to choose solar every day of the week. Every day of the week. Even when you start to increase costs of like firm capacity, include costs of firm capacity, such as solar's only on 30% of the time, so you have to account for that. People are still just going to choose solar because, one, with every year that continues and every bit of evidence in the western part of the world, we cannot build nuclear, and nuclear is much more expensive than we originally had it baked into the calculations for. Usually people thought you could get it for 6 cents a kilowatt hour, but France has just shown that it costed 12 cents a kilowatt hour, double what they thought it would.
That's true. Interesting.
And as well, if 90% of the world's fleet is getting very old, do you think the chance of an issue coming up is increasing or decreasing?
Yeah, definitely.
If there is a Fukushima equivalent in a non-earthquake, non-tsunami area, that's a bullet. That's a deadly bullet into nuclear.
Yeah, it'd have to be. I mean, somewhere in the US, that would be the end of US nuclear, I would say.
Yeah, Fukushima is only just starting to like get tourists back, but even then, it'll take a generation for their tourism sector to get back up and running. There's a huge farming thing as well, even though it's been shown time after time that there's nothing dangerous about the food being grown there. People weren't able to sell their food from if it was grown in the Fukushima region.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how the economics does play out, and whether solar plus wind plus storage can make this a thing that we look back in 10 years and it's the same as us right now debating whether we should still, I don't know, use ox-drawn carts in our farms and things.
I'm not going to say that this is good or bad for the climate debate. I just wanted to comment on the fact that I think we've forgotten how to produce nuclear, and we don't really talk about it. It's like during the Dark Ages when the Romans went kaput. We forgot how to make concrete for like 400 years. Cement, yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, you must think if we plan to be a multi-planet civilization at some point, nuclear seems like a logical power source on a completely barren new planet.
Yeah. Incredibly energy dense. Like the production, like the consumption of uranium in France is like 8,200 tons per year to power 70% of the country, which doesn't seem like a lot of stuff to power an entire, like a big country like France, a big energy intensive country like France. Like something 8,200 tons. That's like one big ship.
One big ship.
Yeah. So like, yeah. To reach our explosive growth, which we talked about in episode 7. Was it 7? Yeah, let's go 7. We need to probably figure out how to do nuclear again.
There you go. Well, look, if any of our listeners are, hotshot young guns thinking about what career to pick in the future, nuclear engineer might be the way to go.
But go to China to do it.
Yes, that is a caveat. Very good, very cool.
So, wow, I'm all worked up. I'm all jittery after that. I'm fired up.
Ready to build some plants. Awesome. Well,
what have you been doing this week, mate? Other than work and podcasting, what have you got? Anything out for the people?
Putting out the old newsletter. Heading up to Sunshine Coast today to give a talk on how we're using AI at work. I'm going to see if I can record it. If I can, I'll put it on the channel, but no promises. I don't know what the AV situation is going to be like up there. As we learned today, AV is not always reliable, but I'll do my best. What about you?
Another post out on the problem solving. I've started putting all our podcasts up on my blog as well. So if you want to check out my blog to check out our podcast, you can go do that if you want. But we've started we put a bit more effort into the podcast now that we're post episode 6. We've got some shorts coming out now as well, just little snippets. Would love your feedback on those. And then we've also got some funky new entries and exits for the podcast, but apparently YouTube thinks we're stealing the music from someone, even though it's royalty-free music. So we can't make ad revenue just yet, but just yet. But lucky we're sponsored by the Island of Mauritius sugarcane juice company.
They're unlikely to be watching to correct that statement. Very good. Very good. Well, dear watchers, dear listeners, however you refer to yourselves, thank you for tuning in to episode 9. Do all the YouTube things, subscribe, like, leave comments, all that good stuff. Help tune the algorithm of YouTube, learn its secret language, and get us onto those feeds. But most of all, thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking us out. And please join us next week for our very first attempt at a live episode.
Should we tell people when we should tell people when the live episode's going to be? It'll be like 5 p.m. Brisbane time, Friday, approximately.
We'll post something on the socials. So hit us up on Twitter and you can find out about that. Other than that, hope everybody has a fantastic week. Ta-ta.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode. Please subscribe so you can keep up to date with all the things we're talking about. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions of what you'd like us to run through, hit us up on Twitter or leave us a comment. Please do all those things you know we're going to ask you to do. Like, comment, subscribe, review. It helps us know what you lovely people want to learn more about. Once again, thank you. See you next time.